Hi everyone, welcome along. We're here today with the lovely ladies from Inclusively Down. We've got Lucy Clarke and Julie Knight with us today, coming to talk to us a little bit about their experiences working with children and young people with SEND and why they got involved with the Learning for Life project. So, lovely to see you. Thank you so much for coming along. First of all, I just wanted to ask you, why? Why did you get involved and what was the inspiration?
We'd already done Teach Me To then, so we'd already built up that kind of idea of having videos freely accessible for everybody, and the concept was there. And I think as part of that, we had always thought that our young people just didn't have enough access to good resources for SRE. So that's kind of where we were starting, and we started to have conversations about, the videos we've made for Teach Me To, we could actually be doing those for SRE concepts, so we don't have to just keep going over the same thing. And you guys at Learn and Thrive had been thinking exactly the same thing, and so the planets just collided.
In a
car park.
In a
car park.
It was in a car park.
Yeah, and so we just realised we were thinking along the same lines, and what a good idea it would be.
So what were the experiences that you were having out in schools? What were you seeing that made you think that there was something missing, that there was a gap that we needed to fill?
I think it was a mixture of things we were seeing happening and also questions that we were being asked when we were going in on visits, usually around public, private, inappropriate touch, etc. And it was a real big issue, wasn't it? And as Lucy said, we just kept kind of repeating the same things. So it would be things like some of our young people may be accused of sexualised behaviour, inappropriate touching, or there would be incidents of young ladies coming out the toilets, half dressed, etc.
Yeah, and I think we realised that actually a lot of the time we were saying, but have you taught them the concepts? Have you actually sat them down and gone through what is okay and what isn't okay in a public space? And often they hadn't. These things might be happening in year 6, year 7, year 8, and sometimes some of our students hadn't even been exposed to the full RSE curriculum. They'd been taken out of it because they thought it wasn't the right time or they weren't ready for it. And yet puberty and changes and all those sorts of things, and being included alongside other young people, that was all happening to them. So they were getting accused of things that we actually were then saying, no, hold on a minute, they just haven't got the knowledge.
A lot of people would say, well, actually, these guys are at schools. This should be part of the national curriculum. It shouldn't be necessarily something that an external charity is having to put in place. What would your answer be to that?
I think it definitely is something. I think schools are really good at teaching the science aspects of SRE for our young people, but it kind of ends there. I don't think they really know how to kind of approach that kind of lessons and topics with them.
I think we always say, don't we, some have had good teaching and some have had no teaching. And actually it works, the videos work for all of them, because even if they've had good teaching, it needs breaking down further, it needs being made more explicit in what you're teaching them, more instructional in how they're going to carry those things out and what they actually need to do. But equally, for some of those students, it's the first time they've ever heard those concepts, because those conversations are really difficult to have in schools and for parents, and teachers don't need to be as instructional with their other students. So it's kind of twofold, isn't it? That actually, yes, included still alongside their typical peers, absolutely immersed in the whole curriculum, but there's still a place for more.
There's kind of the assumption that they already know it, or they've been taught it, and so they should know. There's not the sort of realisation about the repetition, the consolidation of all the skills, and often it's a reactive to something that's happened rather than actually being proactive and teaching.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things we've seen with the project is actually we've got a lot of older pupils using it. So actually a lot of 16 to 25 using much more than we thought we would. And do you think that's probably down to the fact that maybe those base concepts aren't being taught in secondary spaces because they're part of the primary curriculum and therefore they're not necessarily being taught in secondary schools? Or why do you think that is with the older group really picking this up?
I think, again, it's about the assumption that they, already know, and maybe they have done it earlier on. But of course, we know with our young people, we need to keep repeating and going back to certain concepts and, that reminder and that visual approach. And maybe the older ones don't get so much of that.
Yeah, the revisiting, definitely. And that actually isn't just SRE, that's all concepts across the secondary curriculum. Sometimes it's just assumed, and what secondary curriculum does is build on the primary curriculum. And if actually you didn't get it the first time, there's not actually time to revisit. And often we see our students kind of forgetting or not being able to build on those foundational concepts. And that's across the board, not just in SRE. So,
And have you got any kind of examples, obviously no names, anonymous and things to protect people, any kind of examples of situations where you've found that people have got themselves into tricky spaces, and what the difference of learning using the Learning for Life resources had to them?
I guess we see the same sorts of things again and again. So often we'll see behaviours happening that get a reaction, because there's nothing that gets as big a reaction as a behaviour that might be deemed inappropriate or sexualised. And of course that causes, within schools, rightly so, a massive response. But the problem is, we know that some of our students, if they get that response, then actually that perpetuates the behaviour. So for example, a young man who actually accidentally, I would say, touched his male TA in the groin area and winded him. And of course, there was naturally a big response. And actually, therefore, the next time that student wants a response or wants to maybe leave the room or etc., actually that happens again and again. And so when you're then saying to those staff, the best thing you can do is not even rise to it, you just don't respond, you don't react, that's hard. Because actually that's not something they go to work for or want to be or know how to deal with.
Yeah.
So then you're thinking, in that particular instance, it was a case of the male member of staff wearing a cricket box so that actually he didn't have to respond. And the thing is, we laugh, but actually it really gets serious with our students. So it does cause a problem.
Yeah, we had a young man many years ago. So the Learn and Thrive resources weren't available then, but would have been ideal. And he was on his way to school in a taxi with another young lady, and they were messing about, and he touched her chest. And the escort on the taxi saw that, and of course then he was taken up to the office and actually had an exclusion because of it, because, inappropriate touching. But actually, when we started to unpick what happened and actually talk to the young lady that was involved, she was actually able to explain that actually they were playing a game and it was just messing about and it was an accidental touch. So those resources that are now available would have been ideal, teaching the boundaries and what is appropriate touch and what isn't.
I think perhaps the biggest example of how the videos specifically work is in the first package, the Growing Up and Keeping Safe, which is kind of where it all originated, because we started there because they were the things we got asked about most, the public and the private and the hugging and the personal space and all those sorts of things, who you can touch where and when, etc., etc. And so again, it was a case of actually working on those concepts to be able to support our young people to know we can't just go around hugging everybody. That isn't just about what's appropriate, it's also what leaves them open to being exposed to all sorts of things that we don't want them to be exposed to, And so actually that, when we've then worked those through with our young people, I think that's where we've probably seen the biggest progress in terms of our young people then being able to say and advocate for themselves what's public and private. To the smallest example of a young man who actually used to, in a very open household, be able to walk into the bathroom when mum's on the toilet, and actually that needed to change so that he knew it was a private space for himself. And so the first time he was then able to say, when he walked into the bathroom, whoa, no, mum, that's private. Actually the parent texted me to tell me, because that was a massive step forward for him. So it's things like that, isn't it? And the hugging of peers.
Yeah, I think particularly with sort of adolescent girls in secondary school, they can get a bit touchy-feely, but it's understanding when that's appropriate and when it isn't. And this young lady I worked with, and we were talking about relationships and trying to work out, she understood the different types of relationships. And she obviously didn't, because she regarded her TA and teachers as her friends, and actually it was okay to go and hug them. But of course, when she became sort of 15, 16, then it gets a bit tricky, because the concern is that she then does that outside of a school environment or a safe home environment, and then, you know, it's a safety, it's a risk, she's vulnerable. So we have to get in and kind of teach those relationships and those boundaries and appropriate ways of greeting. And we did. It did take a while, but we got her to do, you know, high five, fist bumps rather than the hugging.
It's as much about teaching staff, isn't it, sometimes, you know, because actually they think that's okay to be like that, and it's natural, it's nurturing, it's kind, you know, and actually we have to then be able to say to them that it's not the right way for our young people to act in public, and they won't necessarily be able to make the distinctions or the generalizations for themselves. So it needs to change for their benefit.
Really hard for staff, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
like you said, actually, a lot of the time it's going against your nature. If you're someone, you know, you would hope that the people coming into that world of working with children with SEN, they are caring, they are nurturing, and actually often with our guys, they will reach out for physical contact, for reassurance when things are tough, and you can totally see why that becomes a norm. But actually what they are then doing is setting them up to being very vulnerable when they're old and when they're moving into adulthood. And that's something that's not very nice, and we don't want to talk about it, and it's particularly as a parent, it's not something you want to acknowledge, it's not something you want to talk about. But actually, if you don't do the work now, you're setting them up for later. And actually, we found in our journey with my daughter very difficult, because a lot of teachers have been so brilliant with her, but actually found that making distance between her and them very challenging, and actually prioritising her friendships with other young people, whereas actually they quite like their friendship with her. They quite enjoy that interaction. It's part of the bit that makes their day fun. And actually they have to sacrifice that to some extent to say, actually, you know what, these are your friends, and actually then we need to give them the skills to be able to manage those kind of relationships within those settings. And it is hard, and I think you're totally right. I think that the training of staff is as important by doing these videos as the training as young people, and we really hope that comes
the modelling for them, and that's it. You're right, they feel like they're being mean, but actually it's just about them thinking long term, not short term.
Yeah, absolutely. So say someone's been running through the videos, they've been through the series, they've done a lot of the side work, they've done the resource work, they've personalised that and expanded. What can they do next to actually really generalise it into real life?
And in the same way we teach a social skill, you know, it's actually almost going through that hierarchy of skills, because it's very easy, isn't it, to drag our children through the curriculum, through concepts, and really give them the support they need. But it's actually about revisiting until those concepts become embedded and that they are able to demonstrate them in public. So teaching a social skill in terms of,
you know, picking out areas that they need to, and it might just be, you know, how to initiate a conversation, but actually unpicking all the skills that are involved in that one skill, and seeing, can they do all those parts? If they can't, then we need to teach those explicitly, and teaching maybe in a sort of safe, comfortable, familiar environment initially, but then taking it out to the wider environment once they become confident and get that feedback. So I think that's really important, because we know with our students what they learn in one situation, they won't automatically generalise into another. So that sort of handover is really important for them.
it's not just about ticking it off, is it? It's about living it. It's about actually practicing it and taking it into different environments. That for us would be how we want the videos to be used. And it's certainly not just about sitting the student or the child down in front of the videos and letting them get on with it, even though that's how they're designed in terms of it's great that the student can actually interact personally. And we've seen students being able to do that, which is massively important for their learning. And I think, you know, all the packages are motivating and they can engage in them. But actually, it is as much about the parent or the member of staff, like you said, using the sheets, being able to record where they're at, and thinking very carefully about what the next steps are. And of course, there are other resources, there are other books, you know, that they can actually go to and expand their knowledge so that they become better at teaching it.
They're more like a springboard,
Yeah.
you know, for practicing, you know, in other areas as well. But it's important to run through and actually pick out those points of where they might need more support, and using, as Lucy said, other resources, etc.
I think that's where the personalisation and everything is so important, isn't it? That actually, although we're putting together the kind of the lesson as such for the young people, actually, the most important thing is that they're actually thinking about their learner and personalising it to their learners' experiences and their family and their situation, and making sure all that happens.
Because a video, you know, has to encompass everybody.
Yeah.
So it's aimed at everybody. We could never personalise for everyone. So that is crucial element of it.
When we're talking about certain things in the Learn and Thrive series for Learn for Life, we do talk in quite black and white terms. So things like hugging, etc. Obviously, you know, when we're talking about it in the videos, we're very specific about who you hug and who you don't hug. Can you talk a little bit more about why you chose to go down that route to approach it?
Yeah, I think we had to be very clear in the boundaries we chose, didn't we?
Yeah.
We had to really come down on the side of this is a yes and this is a no, because if the videos were nuanced in themselves, it would have got too complicated, you know, and actually the students watching them wouldn't have been able to take that knowledge from them. So you have to have a starting point, don't you? And that's where we were very clear that this has to be the starting point, and then each person has to then be able to generalise it, because it never is black and white, is it? And that's the trouble with any concept within RSE and within that whole personal and social skills arena. Actually, the reason it's hard is because it isn't black and white. There's different families do different things, you know, different communities do different things, and different students need different things. So we had to be black and white in the way it was taught, to have a starting point.
And I think a lot of our students are really quite literal,
Yeah.
you know, and maybe not get the, you know, subtleties of, you know, that interaction. So I think that's why we kind of teach that, you know, no hugging, hugs are for home.
Growing Up and Keeping Safe and the Changing Adolescent Body kind of follow on quite closely from each other. The emotions package is a bit more distinct. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you put that together and why you felt that was important?
I think the emotions package had to really be a standalone series because so important. And we find when we go into schools, a lot of schools are very good at using things like zones of regulation and teaching the children how to recognise the emotions that they're feeling, but they don't tend to then move on to that next step and actually teach those strategies to deal with those emotions. And I think it kind of leads in really nicely with the Changing Adolescent Body set of videos, because that's when we talk a lot about the emotional roller coaster and the fact that they're feeling all these different emotions. So they need to have that kind of understanding before of those different emotions. And I think also in schools, we tend to just work on some of the basic emotions, you know, teaching happy, teaching sad, and then we kind of leave it there, where it's really important to move on from those ones and teach those more complex ones, which I think the videos do very well.
Yeah, happy and sad, and often angry as well. And I think angry is often seen as a bad emotion, and that they shouldn't maybe be feeling it, and that they're then being naughty or inappropriate, to go back to that term that always crops up. And actually it was about, I think, on the emotions package, recognising that there isn't a bad emotion. All emotions we all feel, and it was actually about reassuring our young people that that's okay. This is the how you feel, this is the why you feel it, and these are the strategies for actually you might then try them and help yourself to get back to a level, to feel better, to deal with it, you know, and to recognise it always comes full circle, like on the emotional roller coaster. So I think that was a really important part of it as well, actually, as reassurance.
And I think it was important to actually do that in video format, because we know from the research that actually our young people learn better from the videos rather than pictures. I think prior to that, if you're researching, you know, programs and resources to use about emotions, you come across a lot of sort of 2D line drawing type pictures. And I think our children, young people have used those a lot, haven't they? So it was a new way and a way that we knew that they would learn better.
And it's an area our guys just find so difficult, isn't it? Emotions, even into kind of older years, being able to identify the different types of emotions that they're feeling. And so often it comes out in different ways. So, I know that some of our guys, so many different strategies, but I know for my daughter, she will go to the I'm unwell, which actually means I'm anxious, I'm overwhelmed, I'm that. But actually for her, I'm unwell, I'm sick, something hurts. And for a lot of our guys, then like we said, with the anger, they'll kind of use that to label everything. And actually sometimes it's not anger, and that affects us so much, not just in our ability to learn, our ability to cope, but actually our social skills and actually how we build relationships and friendships, and how important that can be for our guys. So it's such a key area, isn't it? And one that I would totally say that make sure that people don't skip over and miss out, think, we've done emotions, we've got an emotions thing, but actually it's really important. And then also that generalising it out, isn't it? It's like it's very well sitting down and building a strategy plan with them in a lesson, but actually are you then taking that out and then helping them to put that in place in real life, so they're using it, so they're actually getting the benefit out of it as well.
A few weeks ago, it was lovely to see a young man that I've worked with for a while, and he got really cross and frustrated. He was playing a game with his friends on the playground, but this time actually it was great to see him. He actually stepped away, he moved away, and then sat down and sort of held his breath, counted to 10. So it was really great to see him using some of those strategies, which means that, he's dealing with it himself and he's not getting into trouble. Because I think, a year ago, he may have got into trouble from his reaction.
Yeah, and absolutely, and particularly in those situations where it's a friendship as well, actually, if he's reacted badly, the amount of repairing of a friendship that was needed, actually, if you can not need that, and you can manage to maintain that relationship is really important, isn't it?
And making the choice of how to respond for themselves is really important, isn't it? Because they're often told how to respond appropriately, and it's teaching them. We do a lot, I think we bring it up on the emotions about the stop, wait, think, take your time, think it through, have the processing time. And actually just in the early stages, one of the children I work with who's in year 3 now, we've really been using stop, wait, think with her because she can be incredibly impulsive. And so she started to use it for herself. But at the current stage, we're at the stage where she will then, and I'll say, remember, you've got to stop, wait, think. And she turned around and said to her TA, I did stop, wait and think, and I didn't want to. So actually, that's the stage you're at, and we know how to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for being involved in everything so far. You guys have been absolutely kind of vital to even the beginnings of Learn and Thrive. So, a massive thank you from us. And maybe if we could just finish off a little bit about what you guys are doing now, like what's next in the race for Inclusively Down.
Well,
what is next for Inclusively Down? I mean, the thing is that I think that when we were making the videos, it's not that we kind of thought, oh, do you know what? We've not got very much to do, so we'll make the videos. So I think with us, and I think with the arena of specialist teaching for Down syndrome, there are not enough of us out there. So, we're always busy. I think this year we're not making a set of videos, which we keep thinking, wow, we've got a little bit of time, maybe we're not making a set of videos. So we're talking about expanding our training, aren't we? We've got an online training offer ourselves and trying to teach to staff, obviously, because it's not necessarily accessible for everyone to get to training. And so we're going to expand that a little bit, aren't we, in the new year?
And revamp the website. And
yes.
We've got quite a long list.
Working on the business, perhaps. But we always make a list and then we never get time for it.
Brilliant. So if people want to get in touch with you outside of here to kind of maybe have a chat, how can they do that?
Absolutely. They can go to the website, which is inclusivelydown.co.uk, or they can email us on contact@inclusivelydown.co.uk.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. It's been so lovely having a chat with you today.
You're welcome. Thanks, Jen.